I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Let it all hang out. DNA brings Sikar people out. The artistic, so gifted. African ancestry gets it. Yes, they black owned for the people.
Javon, hello. Who else is here? Javon's representing for the Congo. All right now. I love it. I love it. Ruby's Africa TV. Hey, we talked to our sister last week. I hope you guys went and downloaded the app. I told you I was going to ask her for an accounting. I didn't do that because I trust y'all do what you say you're going to do. Sister Shawnee's here, Verlicia, Drea. Hey, Drea, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Adrian, Vicky, Verlicia, Ramona. I love all of you all. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Now, you know that we're in the middle of our Why You Matter campaign, and the Why You Matter campaign was established to help encourage Black men to take an African ancestry test as the leaders of our families, as the nurturers of our families, as role models and examples. We want to celebrate and uplift Black men. And one of the best ways we know to do that is by helping them to understand their roots. So men can trace both maternal ancestry and paternal ancestry. Unlike women, we can only do the maternal test. We're encouraging our brothers to take the test for your family. When you get the result, it's the same for everybody on that branch of the family tree. And so there's more information about the campaign at AfricanAncestry.com/Y. And our goal is to get 2,022 men to trace their ancestry by next Father's Day, 2022. So y'all spread the word. Help us get that word out. Norma's here, Alethea, Daphne, my people, blind guy, his wife, their life. Glad to see you. Shout out to Rolando for holding it down for us in the background. So we didn't really give you a whole lot of information about our dope guests who we have with us tonight. They're not just guests, though. They're family members, African Ancestry family members. And you all know how we do. The African Ancestry family is over 1 million people. That's over 1 million stories. That's over, that's just hundreds of thousands of experiences and areas of expertise. And so we're tapping into 2 African Ancestry family members who are rock stars to me in the field of education. And so I want you guys to get your flags ready. I want you to get your apples ready because they're teachers, they're educators, and they're family. I'm going to do ladies first. I love doing ladies first. Hopefully, Dr. Kofi, you support that. Our guest from Dallas, Texas is Ms. J. She was born Jamie LeShaé Jenkins, and she's the founder and executive director of Boom. You gotta love that name, Boom, building opportunities and opening minds. And I'm not gonna do a whole long bio for her because I think she is dope and she can tell us who she is much better. But what I love about her is that she has an intergenerational approach to education. And she's educating our kids through Ms. J's classroom from kindergarten all the way through high school. And then when those high schoolers become adults, they come back in and help with the education. So I'm happy to welcome her to African Ancestry Live. Where are you at, Ms. J? Where are you at? Hey.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you for being here. She has a creative lab. So her Ms. J's classroom, I meant to say this part, is a creative lab for freedom-based art, education, and activism. What? Did you hear that? A creative lab for freedom-based art, education, and activism. I can't wait for this conversation to get started. Welcome.
Thank you.
And then bringing up, representing for the Y chromosomes in the family, we have Dr. Kofi Akindije. Hello, Dr. Kofi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. He is the Director of Student Equity and Success at Cabrillo College. Did I say it right? Is it Cabrillo?
You did, you got it right.
Okay, perfect. Cabrillo College in Cali, out there in Cali. And he obtained his doctorate of education in higher education leadership from Azusa Pacific University, but he is focused on building institutional capacity to take anti-racist action. And he's working with college students in that system to make this happen. So welcome to both of you. I hope Wendy and Orlando can help us manage the background noise. You guys know, our regulars know, sometimes we have problems with background noise. Anyway, I got to these two amazing family members because they both are using African Ancestry test kit in their program. And that's how we were introduced. So, Dr. J, can you talk about what motivated you to include African Ancestry?
You said Dr. J or Dr. Cole? I'll take it.
All doctors. Ms. J. I'm sorry. Ms. J.
I'll take it.
Say my name, right? Ms. J. What motivated you to bring the African Ancestry experience into Boom?
Yeah, so I think it's important that if we're going to have any kind of real education, any kind of experience that moves beyond schooling. So if I start there and talk about the difference between schooling and education, schooling is really about like the programming experience, indoctrination, taking in information and being able to use that information to operate in a society, right? And then you have education, which is really about you finding out about your own identity, your own gifts, your own ways of navigating through the world and using that to solve problems for yourselves and for each other. To have an education about who we are. And I think it's important that to push against the colonial experience, we have to pull back on what are our roots. To break away from starting history in the enslavement experience, we got to be able to say like, okay, what was there before? So it's important for me in Boom that children have that experience of recognizing like, oh, there's a history for me or a herstory for me that started way before this stuff that they're telling me in school. You're on mute, I think.
Yeah. One day y'all gonna be able to read my lips. I was saying, Dr. Kofi, what about you? Because you're dealing with college students. So one would think perhaps that they would already have this sense of knowledge.
You would think. You know, students, you know, in particular, Black students have experienced subtractive schooling, which I'm going to speak about a little bit later on. And so, you know, people have lost their heritage. And so as a director of student equity and success here at Cabrillo, and also in commemoration of Juneteenth, I wanted to offer this opportunity for Black students here at Cabrillo College to be able to get connected to their roots. And so it's going really well. I'm super excited. We're planning on having a big reveal party. So I'm really looking forward to it. But this is just a great opportunity. And especially because a lot of people just didn't know about it, you know.
That leads me to another question because you're bringing it to, you had to get approval from an institution to be able to do this. But Ms. J, you're running your own thing. So can you talk about any challenges that you may have faced in making the decision to bring this to students?
Yeah, so I didn't have any challenges when I reached out to my supervisor, who has always been supportive of everything that's taking place in the Office of Student Equity. She was like, yes, let's go for it. So I submitted the order and we're moving forward.
And would that have been the same case prior to, like, let's say 2 years ago? Do you think that equally as open?
I think so. I think so, especially since the president of our college, Dr. Matt Wetstein, he's just very supportive of equity efforts. And so I definitely believe that it could have happened, 2 years ago.
And what about you, Ms. J? I know you didn't have any barriers.
Nope. Nope.
It was probably being able to get enough tests, probably, huh?
Yeah, so it was really more about like raising the funding because we're a nonprofit. So it wasn't an issue of like, could we do it? It's just, could we fund it? And so there was a wonderful organization. They think about how to reinvent schools. And so we pitched it and we said, we want to be able to buy these kits for kids. And they donated $10,000 to the effort.
Wow. That's great. That's when you know you're doing the right thing, when you can get donations like that. So I just want to bring up one thing, because I got to talk to the Boom students, and they range in age. I feel like the youngest one seemed like they were second grade. Is that?
Actually, the youngest are in kindergarten. So we have them as little as 4 and 5 years old. I believe one of the little girls who asked you a question, Camille, I think she's about 5 or 6.
Look, they all look so little to me. And the coolest thing for me was I was trying to think. I didn't want to just talk at them, and I don't work with kids. So I was like, what do I ask from kids? And when I asked how many countries are there in Africa, I was getting such massive numbers, which was cool, which means they knew that there were a lot of countries, but not quite as many as they said. That was fun. So you mentioned, Dr. Kofi, subtractive schooling, and Ms. J, I know that you are very much into radical imagination, and those two things in my mind are quite connected. So I think maybe let's start with subtractive schooling and then work our way into radical imagination. And just feel free to jump in. Certainly don't wait for me to say, what do you think?
Yeah. So some time ago, I read this book, Subtractive Schooling by Dr. Angela Valenzuela. And she said that subtractive schooling is basically stripping those persons who come from minoritized communities, racially minoritized, in particular, stripping them of their language and their culture. And so, oftentimes people say that the educational system is broken, but I would argue that it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. And so a part of my responsibility and my passion is to interrupt, right, the way that the system works, so that we can create an environment where students can experience teaching and learning without limits.
I had to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Yeah, so definitely related. My background actually starts in the classroom. I was a high school history teacher. And when I was there, so I came out of an HBCU. In my HBCU experience, I was learning history from a new way, and I realized so much had been hidden, or maybe not even just hidden, just unknown in the public school system. And so I was just really excited to teach history, right? So I get into the public school system. I'm teaching history from primary sources, things that weren't in our curriculum. And I was reprimanded for teaching what they called inflammatory content. The goals in our schooling system are really about making sure that kids know right and wrong, yes and no. This is the right answer. And the problem with that is when you have a situation like ours as people of the diaspora, where we're trying to achieve freedom. Freedom is something that doesn't exist collectively, which means we have to be able to imagine, reimagine, invent, think of what's impossible. And to do that, you have to be able to ask questions. You have to be able to challenge what we believe is true. You have to be able to say like, well, people are saying that's the answer, but maybe there are other answers. And so radical imagination for me is critical, but there's a lot coming at us in schools and even culturally that is pushing us to not ask questions, to not experiment, to not make mistakes, to not challenge the status quo. And I think it's important that we as educators being not just in the classroom, because parents are the first educator. So anybody who has kids, plays with kids, watches kids, you're an educator of some sort. And so we got to get into a space where we're encouraging the things that we've been told are impossible. If a kid says, well, I think I can fly. Yes, baby. Let's figure out how. Like, let's move away from this culture that tells us no, and move more into a space where we're like, okay, well, how do you think we can do this? How can we figure it out? What can we test? How can we practice? And I think that's how we get more Dr. Pages. That's how we get more Dr. Rick Kittles, who are inventing things that were once impossible and now are a reality.
Mm-hmm. And so how do we do that? How do we do that at the K through 12 level? And then how do we do it at the collegiate level? Like what kinds of things are you doing, are you pushing for, Dr. Kofi, at Cabrillo to encourage this kind of a radical imagination?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I did was I developed a student equity certificate program, and it was designed to help administrators, staff, faculty to be able to challenge their funds of knowledge and to replace those funds of knowledge with funds of knowledge that are culturally relevant. And so it's a year-long program in which participants get an opportunity to use critical action research to actually address some type of educational inequity in their domain of influence. And so, we have an opportunity to talk about reframing student success and using strengths-based approaches to higher education. We also have an opportunity to explore critical action research, right? How do we actually get to the root cause of the problem so that we can actually address it in a meaningful way? And so I'm just really happy that to date, we've had almost 100 people that have gone through the program. We focused on things such as textbook affordability, looking at, infusing a culturally relevant curriculum into communication studies courses. We had one faculty member who did that and did an excellent job on it. And so it's really about offering those opportunities for people to really think about the context in which they operate and work in, and how did they actually get to that point? And then how do they move out of that cycle of socialization and to use that cycle of liberation to be able to infuse student equity into their teaching practices.
I've heard liberation, I've heard freedom, and I know when you heard liberation, Ms. J, you were like, okay. And you've done some of this work yourself with your social justice teacher education framework, right?
Yep. So my background before starting Boom, I did a few things. So I worked in the classroom. So that was high school kids. I taught in Atlanta, then I taught in New York. And then after that, I worked at an organization called Teach for America, where my whole job was about disrupting some of the problematic things that were happening through the organization. A lot of people might not be familiar with Teach for America, but it's an institution that selects who are considered like high performing college students, place them in the classroom to teach for 2 years. And a lot of our community members around the nation had problems with that model because folks were coming from places outside of our communities with no cultural background with our kids. And it was causing a lot of emotional and psychological harm to the kids, while the teachers went on and did amazing things. And so my job when I went in, first it was about diversity, equity, and inclusion and helping teachers to understand that. But then I started building pilots where I started working with college students to understand history, to understand culture, to understand the communities that they were going into and their responsibility to be support and work with communities and not have power over communities. So that was the work that I did. And then I went into consulting after that. But yeah. Somehow I got muted. Sorry. But I think there was a second question that you asked. What was the second question as well? Wait, you're mute now too.
Let's play the Mute Olympics on African Ancestry Live tonight.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me, Dr. Kofi? We got our technology. Can you hear me now, Ms. J? She still can't hear us. Well, what I was saying was I've been taking notes, so I don't remember the second part of the question, but she'll come back in. Listen, you guys seem to be coming at it kind of from opposite. You're attacking the problem from opposite ends and pushing on both sides to get to this objective in the middle. And okay, here she's back. Let's see. Hey, can you hear us now, Ms. J? Nope, she still can't hear us. Dr. Kofi, what do you think about the role that Africa plays in this reimagining our education?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. Wow, what role does Africa play in it? Ooh, I don't have an answer for that. Wow.
That's okay. Think about it.
Yeah.
Because, one could argue that we could just say we have a history before slavery and leave it at that. One could say, well, let's know where we came from and then start there, or we can go all the way back. So I'm just wondering, especially when you're in an institution, how far you think you can push the Africa envelope when you're trying to construct this new way of looking at ourselves for your students.
Yeah, I think we can push the envelope. We really have to understand who we are in order to be, liberated from oppression that we experience on a daily basis. And so I feel like, through conversations, I've heard, people saying that they're trying to get more connected to their roots, in the motherland. And so, I just see myself as, just really being there to help people, to encourage them to do that. Yeah, that's a good question. I want to think about it some more, and I'm sure I'll integrate it a little bit later. Yeah.
No problem. I didn't mean to put you on the spot with a question you hadn't really considered. But let's talk about you, because you were named Kofi Akindije.
Correct.
So how did you get there?
So that's because of African ancestry. So in 2017, I took my paternal test, and I found out where I was from, which was the Sogo tribe in present-day Gabon.
Shout out to Gabon. Let's see. Can we get some Gabon flags in the comments? Where's Gabon tonight? Okay.
And also the Kota people in Gabon as well. And then last year, 2019, I took my maternal lineage test and found out that my family is Timni people in present-day Sierra Leone.
Ooh, you got a lot of cousins on here.
I know.
You got a rack of cousins on here.
I know. And so what I did was, it was really an awakening for me, right? It was this journey. It took me to get there. And last year on Juneteenth, I submitted my legal papers to the court to have my name legally changed from Keith Johnson to Kofi Akindije. And I wanted to get a name that meant something. So, Gabon, is here. And then Sierra Sierra Leone is here. And I wanted to get a name that was in between because I didn't want to choose either or. And so I chose the Nigerian last name Akinjide because it means the strong one has returned. And so for me, it was that one person in my lineage, I'm returning to my roots, thanks to the work of African Ancestry. And then Kofi is Ghanaian, and it means born on Friday. And it happened to be Juneteenth was on that Friday last year. So I submitted my papers and I did it. And it was interesting because I reached out to my mom and I talked to her a little bit about it. And she was in favor of it, which was kind of shocking to me. But she was in favor of it, but she still calls me Keith every now and again. But yeah, I changed it because I wanted my name to mean something. And if I'm ever blessed to have children, I wanted them to have a lineage that was connected directly to their roots in the motherland.
I love that. Ms. J, welcome back. Can you hear us?
Yes.
You guys, do you all talk about names at Boom?
We do talk about names. We do it in the first week. So they have an orientation week where we start talking about like who we are, building relationships. So we do talk about names.
Now, when you jumped off, you were asking me about the second question I asked, and I didn't remember, girl, because I'm taking notes on everything you guys are saying. But you were talking about, I don't even remember what you were talking about. Let's move on. And if it comes back to you, then we'll jump back in. But tell us about your African ancestry experience and how it went for you, how it has impacted you.
Well, I'm excited because I was hoping for this question. I had my certificate ready.
I love it.
I did the test in 2012. And it was after, so I went to Kenya in 2010, Kenya and Tanzania. And I wanted to know more about me and my relationship to the continent. I learned about African ancestry. I took the test. And I found out that I had 100% match to the Mende and Temne people of Sierra Leone through my maternal lineage. And from there, it invoked this whole process of wanting to know language and religion and spirituality and all of these different things. And so I just kept going back. So I have not been to Sierra Leone yet, and I want to, but I've gone back to Ethiopia. I went back to Burkina Faso. So like, I just kept going back because I wanted to know more. And that started, so a lot of that when I was talking about the radical imagination piece, a lot of that came through that experience of going back and reading books and talking to people and learning culture and realizing that there are multiple ways and multiple truths that I just did not know. And had I not traveled, had I not done this test, all of that wouldn't have happened. So this was a critical part of my becoming the woman that I am today.
I love that. And what is so powerful to me about what each of you has said is that finding out where you're from sparks curiosity. And you don't have to be limited to the place or the people that you share ancestry with. That's a starting point. It's the foundation. It's the basis. And then you grow in all sorts of ways, just like a tree does, just like our families do. So I love the fact that, Dr. Kofi, you chose names that weren't necessarily from the countries that we found your roots in, maternally or paternally. And I love the fact that you, Ms. J, you traveled to many African countries. One of the things people often, there's a school of thought, there is a group of people who say, well, I don't want to take the test because I don't want to be limited to one African country. And to me, that's just foolishness. Like I don't understand that way of thinking. No one says, like, I was raised in DC, right? So that's I'm always going to represent Chuck Brown. I'm always going to represent for the formerly known as Chocolate City. But that doesn't mean I can't live in Atlanta or Palo Alto or Ann Arbor or New York. It doesn't, it just, you don't have to be limited. So thank you for sharing how expansive you can become once
Mhm.
you trace your ancestry. Okay, I have a gazillion more questions. Cabrillo College has an interesting background, and it's an odd juxtaposition to the work that you're doing. Can you talk about what made you decide to go to Cabrillo College?
Yeah. So, several years ago, I knew that I wanted to go directly into student equity and success to work. And I think a part of it was my religious background. So for about 7 years, I was a pastor of an AME Zion church in Pasadena, California. And I also went to seminary. And so I had an opportunity to study liberation theology, thinking about James Cone and J.D. Otis Roberts. And so it was always in me. And then also my mother was an educator. And so, as I was going through my doctoral program, um, I thought to myself, how can I get myself into a position to be able to do what I'm passionate about? And if anybody has ever lived in the LA area, you'll know that jobs are highly impacted. For one position, you might have 500 applicants, give or take, right? So I decided to move north in California. And initially, before I got here, I was working at the University of California at Santa Cruz as an EOP STEM counselor. And while I was there, this job became available, and it aligned with everything that I was studying for that I wanted to do my research on for my dissertation. And it was interesting because I told my doctoral chair, I said, well, I'm just going to apply for this position because I want to have some practice so that when I graduate, I can move into that position. Well, they hired me. And so here I am. And I love working here. It's a great opportunity. A lot of people really want to learn and want to grow. And so just being able to have that opportunity to lead them and guide them. And in particular, thinking about shifting the culture from a deficit-based culture to a strengths-based culture. So case in point, oftentimes we hear people use the word minority. And Ibram Kendi speaks about this in his book, somewhere around the last chapter or so, the historical context of minority, of being a minority in the presence of those who were labeled as major. And so I have been in conversation with people and guiding them to use language that is strengths-based, to use minoritized as opposed to minority, because minoritized really emphasizes that people have been forced into a minority status through policies, procedures, and practices that perpetuate racism within our country, and in particular within higher education.
And what percentage of the student body at Cabrillo is of African descent?
1.4%.
Whoa!
Yes,
Whoa!
yes.
So you're
Yes.
working in an environment that is 1.4% students of African
Mm-hmm.
descent. I imagine there are probably even fewer professors.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. There's even fewer, but we're working on it, right? This is an opportunity for us to work on it, and so we're doing that and really partnering with other community colleges to be able to get to that point. So, but there's other issues, right? When we think about education and bringing trying to diversify areas, you have to also think about the local context, right? Because the cost of living in California is astronomical, right? And then not only that, then also you have to look at the cultural context, and to ask yourself, is this an inclusive environment for people who come from racially minoritized communities to live in? And California is a weird place, right? It has this reputation of being very inclusive, but it's not always that way, depending upon where you go. So we're working towards it, and a little bit at a time, at a time.
Well, I want to bring you in, Ms. J, because I know in your classroom it's probably 98% people of African descent, right? So you have a completely different experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
your process.
Yeah. So what was your original question though? Because you asked him something that led to that discussion.
Look, I would be failing in Miss J's class. Well, the way I asked him what it was like being at Cabrillo College and how he chose that.
But so you're asking me what's like being in this space of all blackness?
Well, no, my question to you actually is completely different because
Okay.
I think I would suspect that you have a different set of challenges.
Yeah.
I know as African Ancestry, we get people who say, I'm not African. We get people who say, what difference does it make where in Africa I'm from? We get people who question the validity of the work simply because they have a different level of consciousness. And so I'm wondering if you face that in your work in Ms. J's classroom, or how it manifests when you're looking at when you're working along the spectrum.
Yeah. So I would say in Boom, not as much. In Miss J's classroom, yeah. So I'll start with Boom. So Boom being the organization that works with the children starting from kindergarten all the way up through college and early career. Some of the challenges that we have there are less about am I African or not, and more about uprooting the ways in which schooling has us process whiteness as the truth. And it's not like an overt, like, yes, white is right, white is better. But what we're seeing a lot of is like the cultural norm is whiteness in our country. So anything that we talk about in curriculum, even the ways in which we think about how to manage a classroom, how to structure and discipline comes through that white framework. And so a lot of my work is working with Black folk on undoing that and questioning why we approach our children in those ways, asking questions about why do you think that's true? Why is that the way in which you want to structure this session with the child? So with Boom, it's a little bit more about like, how do we help people to see the ways that whiteness is like all over how we think and move and do? And I would say like in my consulting work, I see a lot more of the challenges around like, well, I'm not African, I'm Black. And that kind of thing where we have to ask those questions about like, so what does that actually mean, right? One of the things that I thought about when you were talking to Dr. Kofi was like, even with terminology, right? Slave. One of the things that I did with Miss J's classroom was I created this visual. It was a visual journal called Who You Calling Slave? And it was dedicated to Harriet Tubman. I dressed as Harriet Tubman. I went to this gentrified park in Dallas. It's in this place called Turtle Creek. Dressed as Harriet Tubman, stood there while all of these white folk were running past, and had a camera with my friend. And I stated this poem, Who You Calling Slave? I know you're not talking to me. And so it's on my website. But long story short, the point is starting to push against the language that makes us believe in white supremacy. So I don't even say enslaved anymore. I use the actual term of captured, hostage, tortured, to name explicitly what happened. And so pushing against the ways in which even language seeps into how we create this power dynamic. So yeah, hopefully I answered the question. I feel like I went all over the place.
No, listen, I want to hear what you have to say, whether I ask a question or not. But I do have a question now. So we all know that education and schooling doesn't just happen in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so when we're talking about changing the language, challenging the frameworks, what roles can the parents play in this? I asked that question of both of you, actually. Because we have a lot of parents who are watching, a lot of grandparents, aunties. What role can we play? What can we do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say being there to support your children. So there was an article that was written by Tara Yoso on community cultural wealth, and she speaks about familiar capital, right? Being able to have that sense of community that gives us strength to persevere through adversity. And so I would say to parents, be there, encourage them, support them, say, hey, if this is what you need to do in order to be successful, then go ahead and do it. And, even as we think about education with that, it's really necessary to do that because as Ms. J was saying, we live in this environment that is saturated with white normativity, right? And in the midst of that, we live in a context that is highly individualistic, right? Which is a characteristic of white normativity, highly competitive. And so, but the reality is every student that comes to PWIs or predominantly white institutions don't come from individualistic cultures. We come from a collectivistic culture, right? And so it's a shock when you come to college and all of a sudden you have to do everything on your own. People don't always, show a high level of empathy and affirmation for who you are. And so family is so important. And even as I think about my own mother, right, who raised 2 Black boys in Jersey City and Portsmouth, Virginia. So here I am, she told me every day, you're going to college. And she made sure that I was surrounded by people who went to college. And it made a difference to where I am here now. And then lastly, I want to add this point. 2nd grade, I failed because I had difficulty reading, right? And so for me, that was a challenge. And here I am now, but I'm where I am now because my mother said, this is what you're going to do.
I love this question. And as I was thinking about like how to respond, I thought of 4 very, very important teachers in my life. And these were my parents. And so I say 4 because I think of parents, and which I found was an African way of thinking of it, not just my mother and my father, but my aunties and my uncles. And so I'll say first, my mother had very, very, very high expectations for me. And it wasn't out of like this fear, but it was really on this like love level that she was like, no, that is a smart child. And she is going to perform at that level of genius that she has in her. And she was demanding about it. And I think the other thing that she did that I took for granted until I became a woman was like, she was very, very proud of who she was. She saw herself as beautiful. And I think it's important that mothers love themselves and care for themselves, because I saw that growing up. I saw her choose things for herself and say like, nope, this is my black walnut ice cream. This is for me. Nobody else can have it. I think those things are important. Because you need to see that, because it becomes a model for how to take care of yourself in a world that tells you shouldn't, a world that tells you need to always slave and take care of other people. My Uncle Jack, he made me read the dictionary, and he taught me a lot about the use of language and words, and the importance of reading. My Aunt Rhonda was the person who affirmed anything I said I wanted to do, anything. If I said I wanted to go to the moon, she was the one who was like, yes, how we gonna do it? How we getting there, Jamie? So my Aunt Rhonda was affirmational. And then my Uncle Jeff was the one who told me about the world beyond what I could see. I remember, so I'm a 1st generation high school and college graduate. And when I applied for college, I applied for community colleges, even though I was a straight A child. And I was at the top of my class almost everywhere I went. But I didn't know, because I hadn't had anybody go to school, to a university. So my Uncle Jeff was the one who said, baby, you can get a full scholarship and go somewhere. And I got a full scholarship to Clark Atlanta University because my Uncle Jeff was the one who said, you need to be looking outside of Texas. You can go anywhere. And so I would say the things that parents can do is really and truly, one, affirm themselves and love themselves as parents and recognize that you really are the first teacher. You are the foundation, and everything that a child really starts to understand about the world and about how to show up in the world starts with that vision, the parent. I would say the second thing is like pushing against the culture that tells us that somebody is more expert just because they got a degree. My parents, all of them, my mom was 16. The oldest parent that I had was 20 years old when I was born. So like the world, as I started to move into the education space, they told me that my parents were dumb, like because they didn't have these degrees and these diplomas. And I would say like, no, push against that. There's a lot of wealth and genius in our parents, in our grandparents, in our community, regardless of whether they went through these institutions or not. But beyond.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold it. We lost you.
Is it there? Is it there?
Yeah.
Okay. So some reason it goes on mute on its own. I don't know what's happening. But I would say the last thing is, and I guess the mic was like, wrap it up. But the last thing is like affirming your child, not just in the hokey ways of like, you're pretty. Like, no. Affirm your child in a way that's like, I see excellence in you. And even if you aren't ready to see the excellence yet, I'm going to ask you to stand in it. So yeah, those are the things that I would say about parents.
Yeah.
I feel your spirit. I wrote this down. We got freedom fighters on here. These two people are freedom fighters. They're interrupters. They're disruptors. They're Mende and Temani and Akeli or Sogo. And they are African. They are the standard of excellence. I appreciate both of you, and we have to have you back because, and we have to have you back individually because I'm like, okay, wait, but I want to hear. So we have to have you back individually, and I think it should be around the reveals. I would love to hear more about and hopefully I'm going to participate. I don't know what the plans are, but I would love to participate if that works for you all in reveals in some way. We have a game that we've started playing called Fact or Whack. And so I want to invite you to play Fact or Whack with us. We pulled up some education statistics. And so I'm going to give you the first one. If you could read the first one, Ms. J.
Okay.
And then what you guys drop in the comments whether it's fact or whack.
All right. So people of African descent across the world are claiming ownership of how they are identified and embracing their African ancestors. African Ancestry recognizes our African descendant cousins who identify as Latinx, Afro-Latino, Afro-Caribbean, etc. The following slides use Hispanic and Latino due to the data sources.
Okay. Here we go.
All right. So there is a larger. Oh, keep going. Oh, okay. This felt like cool.
It was a disclaimer. This is the actual.
There is a larger percentage of white teachers in schools where the majority of students are Black, Hispanic, Latino, and Native American in the United States. Fact or whack?
So is that fact or whack?
That is.
I see some facts. I got some facts coming in here. A lot of facts. Does anybody think this is whack? Does anybody think this is not true? Yeah, it looks like all facts. So is it fact or whack, Ms. J?
Fact.
What can we do about that?
Well, I know the part that I'm trying to play, and it's with Boom, we actually cultivate a lot of college students to go into the classroom. So right now, we have about 7 of our teachers out of 15 have gone into the classroom. The rest are still in college. And so, our focus is on how do we get people from our communities to go in.
Yeah, one way to deal with that too is also to partner with human resources. So one of the things we're doing is trying to recruit more persons from racially minoritized communities. But in order to do that, we have to examine our policies. So for example, when we rate candidates, the traditional way is to look at knowledge, experience, desirables, and those kinds of things. If an institution has equity in their mission statement, then equity should also be an evaluative category, but oftentimes it's not. And when you add in that piece, then you begin to find out who is really down for the cause and who is not. Because as long as we continue to hire the same people who have been socialized in ways in which Black and brown or racially minoritized people are oppressed, we'll continue to get the same result. So in order to really address that issue, we have to start asking questions and hiring different people, and in particular teachers, because as soon as you hire a teacher that a student can identify with, student success increases by 30%, and they have not even taught anything.
Wow. And that makes perfect sense. And,
Mhm.
and I love this because Ms. J is preparing the teachers, and then Dr. Kofi, you're creating the environment to hire them. So we got it from soup to nuts right here.
Mhm.
Actually, there was something. Can I say something in addition to that? So I mentioned before that I worked in a different organization, Teach for America, and I worked on the admissions team. And one of the things that we pushed it was about how do we use cultural wealth as indicators of success. And so in pushing against the ways in which, as Dr. Kofi was talking about, the traditional way of hiring, we started looking at how to use those cultural wealth pieces as indicators, like lived experience, so on. And that changed the dynamic. And so we went from 17% people of color being admitted to 50% people of color being admitted. And so that just took some time. And so Dr. Kofi is right about working with the departments, doing some things like reading books like Dr. Claude Anderson's books, and just getting some knowledge about the ways in which we think about evaluation and success, and changing our model so that we can be more inclusive and equitable.
Right.
I love it. Okay, so the statistic is the majority of teachers are white in schools where a majority of students were Black. 54% of them were Black, 60% of them were Asian, or 61% who were American Indian / Alaska Native. So you guys were right in the comments. That was a fact. So now we have our second and final question, and I'm gonna ask you to load this one up, Dr. Kofi.
Okay. So there are more Hispanic and Latino superintendents in the U.S. than Black or African American.
Now is that fact or is that whack? What you guys got? Let's see. I don't know about that one. I don't know okay, Walter says whack. Vicky says facts. Anybody else? Gotta Robert says fact. Yakota fact. Okay, looks like we got an even balance or a fact and whack, which is an interesting way to look at this question. So is it fact or is it whack, Dr. Kofi and Wendy?
I'm going to go with fact.
It is fact.
And the reason why I'm going to go with fact is because money is behind initiatives to increase representation among our Latinx community.
Makes sense. So where the money is, that's when things happen.
Money and legislation.
School superintendent statistics by race. White superintendents, 68.2% of them are white, 13.9% are Hispanic, Latino, and 11% are Black or African American. And so, I actually love this because there's so many Afro Latinos in the community that need to see themselves as well. That intersection of multiple cultures. And so I'm glad to see this. And we just need to get all the numbers up. How about that? We just need Hispanic, Latino, and Black or African American numbers up. Look, I didn't know what to expect when I brought the two of you all on, or when we invited the two of you all to come join us tonight. I knew from your bios the work that you were doing. I got the opportunity, as I mentioned, to meet some of the Boom students, the sparks and the flames. I love that you call the teachers the sparks, right? And the students are the flames. I love that 1000%. But I am filled. The comments have been incredible in the chat. Normally I say the comments, but I was literally sitting here writing notes on what you guys were saying. So I wasn't as tuned into those. Thank you. Thank you for being part of the African Ancestry family. Thank you for sharing African Ancestry in your programs, not because it benefits us, but because it benefits the collective us. Thank you for being freedom fighters and doing it with style and grace. Thank you for being interrupters and disruptors and not settling for the status quo. I appreciate you both. And thank you for saying yes in advance to coming back.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you
for having us. And I love the work that y'all do, clearly. So I'm excited. Like, if you do want us back, I'm totally down. Totally down.
Yes, no, you are definitely coming back. Thank you so much. And I want to make sure, Wendy, that we put their websites up. What's the website for okay, weboom.org. Weboom.org is the website for listen, you just need to go ahead and be Dr. Ms. J and her work. And then cabrillo.edu/equity is the website for Dr. Kofi and his work. Listen, I appreciate you both. As I tell everybody at the end of each live, we're still in a pandemic. At this point, people are doing what they want to do. Me and mine, we're still social distancing.
Yes.
We're still wearing our mask. And we have African Ancestry masks for those of you who had to get your mask stash back up because you thought masks were a thing of the past. Over at AfricanAncestry.com. Me and mine, we're still continuing to support our immune systems. And me and mine, we are still continuing to support our mental health and that of those we love.
Yes.
I encourage you all as part of the African Ancestry family to do the same. Until we meet again next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, may you all be happy, may you be healthy, and may you be whole. Have a very good night. Thanks.